The federal election has come and gone, and we're right back where we started, a Liberal minority government. To discuss this and how Canada's 44th election unfolded is political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilley, joining us once again from Toronto. Brian, the Liberals were leading or elected in 157 seats. Now that's the exact same number they won in 2019 and 13 shy of a 170 needed for a majority. There's still almost 800,000 mail-in ballots to be counted. Will that change any of the outcomes in some of the tightly contested ridings?
It really could. In my count, it's closer to over 900,000 mail-in ballots waiting to be counted. When I was speaking with Elections Canada, it's weird. There are different numbers. One of my colleagues was told 750. You've got 8. So but regardless, there's a lot of mail-in ballots to be counted, and in some ridings, this could be the difference between a win and a loss. Look especially for British Columbia, because the top 10 ridings, no riding had more than about 12,000 mail-in ballots requested across the country, but 7 of the top 10 ridings for mail-in ballots were British Columbia. That was heavily favored in the Lower Mainland and Vancouver Island. The other 3, 2 were in Ottawa, 1 was in Toronto, 3 Liberal strongholds that will not be overturned. But will some of those other ridings, like Nanaimo Ladysmith, will it be up in the air? We're going to have to wait and see how this plays out and where those ballots go. 12,000 ballots in a tight race can make a world of difference. So we may not know the final count, but at the end of the day, Hal, we're pretty close to living Bill Murray's Groundhog Day life here. We had a 36-day campaign, woke up, and it's the same as it was before. What was the point of the $610 million election? Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe putting out a statement calling it pointless, unneeded, and a waste of money, and said it's time for the federal government to get back to work.
Yeah, it's deja vu for me and you and many of our viewers as well. Now, Brian, many out here expected a Conservative government, at least a minority. What happened?
2 things happened. The Lower Mainland of British Columbia shifted seats from the Conservatives to the Liberals and the New Democrats. And in the 905 region of Toronto, the NDP vote collapsed. Now, there was a lot of talk before the election about would the People's Party steal seats away from the Conservatives. And my read of it so far, and continuing to pore over data, is yeah, that did happen in some seats, including in BC's Lower Mainland area, but also in places you wouldn't have expected. Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario, Nipissing, Temiskaming, 2 northern ridings, Kitchener area in southern Ontario. But the primary problem was that they could not break through in the 905. There's 49 ridings that make up the GTA, according to Elections Canada. They defined the Toronto area for their purposes as 49 ridings. And I think the Liberals took all but 2. The Conservatives took 2. 1 they already held. That was Thornhill, formerly held by Peter Kent, now held by Melissa Landsman. And it looks like they're going to take Vaughan, one of the ridings in the area of Vaughan, just north of Toronto. But other than that, what happened? Suburban women turned their backs on the Conservatives. A lot of voters who were going to go NDP went for the Liberals. The NDP across the entire Toronto area were below 14% of the vote. In many of the suburban ridings where the Conservatives had a shot and they were tight-ish races, the NDP were below 8%. At that point, it is difficult. If you've got a Conservative candidate pushing 40% of the vote, but the Liberal still wins, well, the Green vote went somewhere. Part of that Green vote went to the People's Party. Most of it went to the Liberals. The NDP vote disappeared. When it's 10 points below the national average, it's going to the Liberals. That's hard to fight against no matter who you are.
It's interesting because a lot of our viewers are asking why you guys focus so much on the GTA, the Greater Toronto Area, Brian, because there's just so many seats in those regions there.
There's more seats there than in all of Alberta.
Yeah, it's unbelievable. Now, Brian, the Tories did end up taking the popular vote, but didn't win enough seats. Explain to our viewers how that can really happen.
Because it's really 338 individual elections. And so, the Conservatives won about 31% of the vote in that Toronto area. They won about 35% of the vote across Ontario. So in Ontario, overall, they did better than the national average. But that national average is also bolstered by the fact that In Alberta, it's about 54% of the vote. In Saskatchewan, about the same. But in Quebec, only about 19%. We count our votes by each individual riding. So 338 individual ridings have an election, and they decide who they're going to put into power. In this case, the Liberals lost seats in Atlantic Canada. They came out about even in Quebec. They lost seats in Ontario. They made up for them in British Columbia. They won one seat in Alberta, Calgary Skyview. But, in that one, that's the case of finding a local, popular local politician and having them run. I ran the numbers on that one. And in that case, the PPC was not a factor.
Will the Conservatives consider maybe replacing Aaron O'Toole, or will they stick with their leader as they try to take Canada back?
It depends on whether they want to win or they just want to have a fight. Look, Stephen Harper lost in 2004, learned a lot of lessons, ran again in 2005, 2006, and won. In 2019, they, did away with Andrew Scheer right away. I thought that was a mistake then. I still think it's a mistake to say we've got to get rid of Aaron O'Toole. I've already heard from some Conservatives, Hal, including some who say, look, he ran as too much of a moderate. We need to have a real right-wing party. Well, if you think that the answer to not winning a single seat, one single new seat in the GTA, if you think the answer is go harder right, then don't have a political party, have a debating society, because you've got to find a way to convince those suburban women in the Lower Mainland, in the 905, to cast their ballot for you. Stephen Harper was able to do it without being a liberal light or a liberal sellout. He was able to do it. There are ways to get it done. But just, going red meat, far right, as some of the people calling for O'Toole to be dispatched with, well, all that'll do is, you'll win seats in Alberta that you won by 60%. You'll win by 70% next time. But you're not going to win any more seats in Ontario. Politics is about building a winning coalition. Every party is a coalition. If you just want to be a pure debating society, go ahead. But otherwise, you got to find out why those women in places that used to vote Conservative, like Markham, like Burlington, like Oakville, wealthy suburban suburbs, why did people back the Liberals instead of your guy? And then figure out how to get them onto your side without giving up on all your principles.
Now, Liberal leader Justin Trudeau, Brian, really can't be happy that he didn't get his majority. What went wrong there for the Liberals?
They miscalculated. They miscalculated badly, thinking that they were going to get a majority, that they were believing the hype in the polls. And you and I talked about it at the time, and I said, Hal, don't believe these polls that say it's a cakewalk. And by the way, for the Conservatives griping today, remember, all the pundits, except a few, at the start of this campaign said it was a cakewalk for the Liberals. They're going to win the biggest majority. I had some Liberals telling me 210 seats. None of that came to fruition. So that's a good sign for the Conservatives. Bad sign for the Liberals, though. They believed their own hype. The electorate was fluid. They went from a 10 at one point, 14-point lead to a 3-point lead, back up to a 10-point lead. And they took that as the public was on side with them. No, the public was uneasy, fragile, trying to make up their minds. And then the campaign happened. They were upset that there was a pandemic election. I think that some of Trudeau's foibles and those of his party did hurt him. Remember, he went down in the popular vote. He went down in the number of votes total that his party took. So this is not in any way a victory for him. He is a diminished man with a diminished mandate, but he's still walking around as if he won the world's biggest majority. No humility in his speech on election night. No sign that he thinks he needs to heal the divide that it is in the country between East and West, urban and rural, suburban, different classes of people. He sees none of that. He only sees victory for himself, and that's what he's going to run with.
Brian, let's talk about Maxime Bernier's party, the People's Party of Canada. They failed to secure a seat, including in Bernier's own Quebec riding. Should Bernier maybe consider riding here in the West? I mean, we saw a lot of the video of the rallies, 3,000 people out in Kelowna. Here in Alberta, he had quite a few people come out. Maybe he should focus more on the West and trying to win a seat out here.
There was someone that called into John Gormley's show in Saskatchewan, talk radio show in, my favorite prairie province. You're the second favorite. He called in and said, that Bernier has, this guy was for the Maverick Party, he said Bernier has attracted um, the kooks that go with a new party, and all new parties attract people that are just hanging on. Bernier's unfortunately attracted too many of them, and that leaves a bad taste in the mouth for a lot of voters that might otherwise consider them. He's got a strange coalition of, yeah, the kooks that will show up to any new party, but also he's got people who say they're principled conservatives. He's got former Green voters who are anti-vaxxers. He has people who are just against the lockdowns. If those vaccine and lockdown issues go away by the time the next election goes, I don't know that he's going to go so well. Talking with my friend John Wright, the pollster with Maru Public Opinion, he thinks that this is an interesting movement that we have to study to find out who exactly is in there. The view from the People's Party themselves is they're about 50% disaffected conservative voters, 25% from other parties, and 25% of people who've never been involved in politics. And please, for folks that are disaffected conservatives sticking with the PPC, don't take my comment about kooks as an insult to you. That 25% that was never involved in politics, those are the people that were the kooks that showed up with Trump, the kooks that showed up with the Green Party. These are the people who just are like, hey, new party, let's go. And they've got ideas that get you in trouble and stop your ability to grow. Bernier has to figure out what his party's about. He doesn't have that now. He was able to tap into the anger over vaccine mandates, passports, lockdown measures. Will that be there at the next election? And if he's a pure conservative party, will the Greens that came to him stick around? Will people who were never involved in politics and are just angry at everything stick around? He's got to define it, and he hasn't done that yet. He's let his opposition define him. But yeah, he might want to run out west as opposed to the Boast, because 2 times running now, plus 1 time here in Toronto in the York Centre by-election, he needs to go where he can win. Alberta was the best for him, 7.5%. I think it was about 6% in Saskatchewan, and just over 5% in Ontario and British Columbia. So Alberta might be where he wants to go.
Now, we watch video of NDP leader Jagmeet Singh dancing and celebrating on stage after the election. But Brian, does he really have reason to celebrate?
Well, I mean, let's talk about kooks in politics. The NDP are happy just to show up, and it doesn't matter if they win or lose. In fact, they got rid of Tom Mulcair, who gave them their second best result ever after the 2015 election because he wasn't pure enough. They wanted someone who was never going to promise to balance the budget. Jagmeet Singh took them from 44 seats down to 24, and they acted as if he'd won the Super Bowl. Now he's taken them up to, I think he's sitting at about 28 right now. All these numbers can change, and they're still acting like they won. The NDP has to decide what they want to be. Are they just the conscience of Parliament, or do they want to replace the Liberals as the real progressive option? They've effectively done that in Alberta. They have effectively done that in British Columbia and Saskatchewan. Why aren't they doing it in the rest of the country? Well, they've done it in Manitoba as well. They need to start looking at themselves in that way on a federal level, especially in Ontario. You've got a prime minister who declares he's a progressive, but doesn't take sexual misconduct in his own ranks or military ranks seriously. A man who claims he's an environmentalist, but doesn't hit targets. A man who says he's a progressive looking out for the middle class, but doesn't care about inflation that's wrecking family budgets. This is a goldmine for the NDP. They need to decide that they're not there to prop up the Liberals. They're there to take over the Liberals. But they're not there yet because they're not taking politics seriously, despite being at almost 18% in the national vote.
Now, we only have a couple of minutes left here, Brian, but I wanted to ask you about the Green Party and their leader, Anna Maypaul, losing her bid to become MP for Toronto Centre, with Liberal Marcia Ian winning the riding. What does that mean for the Green Party moving forward?
She should have run somewhere else. They won a seat in Ontario. I believe this is the first time they've ever won a federal seat in Ontario. It was out in Kitchener, where the PPC did well as well. They won the urban core seat in that metropolitan area. Anna Maypaul finished 4th. The Conservative candidate did much better than her. The Conservative candidate got 15%, right here where I'm sitting in deepest, darkest Toronto Centre. That's a horrible result for them. But this is a party that, again, like I was saying about Bernier, he hasn't defined it. The Green Party did define themselves as the environmental party, but then they had all these people latching onto them with crazy ideas, including a bunch of anti-Semites. and they elected a black Jewish woman, and then it turns out there are racist anti-Semites helping run the party, and they're having infights. At the end of the day, Hal, now that we're at the end of the conversation, uh, all the parties have internal problems with their leadership and defining who they are. Nobody should be walking away feeling great about it. The Conservatives did win the most in terms of total votes, but everybody else is coming down. Maybe it's time to stop and do some internal reflection.
And what does it say in the Bible? A kingdom divided against itself cannot stand. So they got to deal with that infighting. So, Brian, many political pundits believe that we may see another federal election in less than 2 years. What are your thoughts?
Well, the prime minister said if he didn't get his majority, we would have another election in 18 months. He said, well, no, I was just talking about the standard length of time that a minority parliament lasts. We know that's not the case. Minority parliaments can last longer. We also know he wants his majority. I say that Justin Trudeau will go for it the next time he sees, as they say in Quebec, winning conditions.
Political reporter and Toronto Sun columnist Brian Lilley, thanks again for your time.
Thank you.